enemies, but to our own people and forces. A leader who fights alongside his men earns a different kind of power than one who directs from afar. He turned to the map of the target area. I won't be in formal command of the operation. That remains Captain Zeta's responsibility. I'll be there as an observer and participant, not to override field decisions in the field. Defense Minister Kaber, who had served with Traore for years before his rise to the presidency, knew that look in his leader's eyes. The decision was indeed final. He shifted gears. Then we must establish strict rules, sir. Communications, pick up priorities, backup plans. Traore nodded in agreement. And this remains completely secret. No one outside this room is to know of my participation until after the operation is complete. The official record will show that I'm conducting an overnight visit to the eastern provinces. The meeting continued for another 2 hours as they refined the operational details. When it concluded, Traore asked General Ureo to remain behind. Once they were alone, the older man spoke with the frankness that only their decades-long relationship permitted. Ibrahim, this is unnecessary. You have nothing to prove. Traore moved to the window that looked out onto the palace gardens, currently bathed in late afternoon sunlight. This isn't about proving anything, old friend. It's about understanding. How can I make decisions that send our young men and women into danger if I've forgotten what that danger feels like? He turned back to face the general. Besides, there's something about this camp that doesn't add up. 3 failed operations against a fixed position? Our forces are better than that. I need to see for myself what we're missing. The general studied him for a moment. You suspect something? Perhaps reports indicate increasing skill in their tactics, new weapons appearing that we can't trace. Someone is supporting them, and I want to know who. As night fell over Ouagadougou, Traore sat alone in his private quarters writing letters. One to his sister, recently discovered and brought to safety after years of separation. One to his closest advisor, containing instructions to be followed if he did not return. The third addressed to the people of Burkina Faso, sealed in an envelope marked to be opened only in the event of my death. Just after midnight, he changed from his formal attire into standard military fatigues without insignia or rank. A knock at the door signaled the arrival of his security chief. The transport is ready, Mr. President. Team Alpha is preparing at the staging area. Thank you, Kaber. Remember, complete secrecy. As far as anyone knows, I'm asleep in my quarters and not to be disturbed until morning. The journey to the northern military base was made in a plain vehicle with darkened windows. No presidential motorcade, no formal protocols. Upon arrival, Traore was immediately escorted to a secure headquarters, Anger, where 24 members of Special Forces Team Alpha were conducting final equipment checks. Captain Zeta, the team commander, approached and offered a crisp salute. Mr. President, while I respect your decision, I must formally state my objection to your participation in this mission. Traore returned the salute. Objection noted, Captain. Now brief me on the final approach plan. For the next hour, he was included into the team's preparation. Though it had been some years since his active combat days, Traore's muscle memory returned quickly as he checked his equipment, reviewed hand signals, and studied the latest intelligence updates. The team would insert via helicopter, landing 5 kilometers from the target to avoid detection. From there, they would proceed on foot through rough terrain, approaching the camp from the east where the rocky landscape provided the best cover. At 01300 hours, the team boarded 2 Black Hawk helicopters. As the aircraft lifted off into the night sky, Traore felt a familiar sensation, the focused calm that precedes combat. Around him, the Special Forces operators maintained professional silence, though he could sense their mixture of pride and concern at having their president among their ranks. The flight was kept low to avoid radar detection. No words were exchanged over the intercom except essential communications. At the designated drop point, the helicopters touched down just long enough for the teams to get off before disappearing back into the night sky. Under a moonless sky, Team Alpha began their approach march. Traore, positioned in the middle of the formation, moved with the practiced quiet of a veteran soldier. Night vision equipment revealed the harsh landscape. Rocky outcrops, sparse plants, dry stream beds, the kind of terrain that had defined Burkina Faso's northern borders for centuries. 2 hours of careful movement brought them to the ridge overlooking the terrorist camp. Captain Zeta signaled for the team to take observation positions. Traore settled beside him, using high-powered binoculars to study the layout below. The camp was larger than the satellite images had suggested. Multiple structures formed concentric circles around a central area. Armed sentries patrolled the edge, but their pattern seemed irregular, almost messy. Something wasn't right. Those guards aren't maintaining proper security protocols. Look at their movements, Traore whispered. Zeta observed for several moments. You're right, sir. They're too casual, too confident. As if they're not expecting an attack, Traore finished the thought. Or, they're prepared for one, Zeta concluded grimly. Traore felt a chill that had nothing to do with the pre-dawn desert air. Change of plans. I want heat scanning of the entire edge and send 2 men to check that ridge to the north. There should be a sentry post there. But I'm not seeing any movement. While they waited for the scouts to return, Rarier continued his observation. The cluster of buildings where intelligence indicated the hostages were being held showed no signs of activity, no guards, no movement, no light. When the scouts returned 20 minutes later, their report confirmed his suspicion. No hostiles on the northern ridge, sir. But we found this. The soldier handed Zeta a small device, who then passed it to Traore. It was an advanced motion sensor, European maker, not the kind of equipment typical terrorist groups in the region had access to. And the heat scan, Traore asked, "Something's wrong, sir?" replied the team's technology specialist. "I'm getting cold spots where there should be heat signatures. The hostage buildings, they're empty." Traore's mind worked, rapidly connecting pieces. It's a trap. They knew we were coming. He turned to Zeta. "Abort the mission. Get the team back to the pickup point immediately." Before Zeta could relay the order, a blinding light suddenly lit up the ridge where they were positioned. The roar of vehicles and shouts in several languages, including French, echoed through the night. "Ambush!" Zeta called out, but it was too late for a clean retreat. The next few minutes were chaos. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions below. Team Alpha responded with controlled counterfire, but they were surrounded and outnumbered. "Fall back to position, Echo," Zeta commanded, referring to a defensive location they had identified during planning a protective formation around HVT, the high-value target. Traore, as the team began their planned withdrawal, found himself at the center of a moving edge of Special Forces operators. His combat training kicked in automatically. Move low, move fast, return fire only when necessary to conserve ammunition. They had covered perhaps 200 meters when an explosion rocked the ground ahead of them. The blast was followed by a burst of heavy machine gun fire that cut off their planned escape route. "They've expected our fallback position." Zeta shouted over the din, "We need to split up." Traore knew the captain was right. A single large group was too easy to target. "Do it," he confirmed. 3 teams will rendezvous at the secondary pickup point." Zeta quickly divided the unit. Team 1 with the president, Teams 2 and 3 to provide distraction fire, then separate withdrawal routes. As the teams prepared to split, Traore made a decision. "I'm going with Team 3. Zeta looked stunned. "Sir, protocol dictates. Protocol won't matter if none of us make it out." Traore cut him off. "They'll expect me to be with the largest group or the best protected one. Team 3 has the most difficult pickup route. They'll be looking for you least." Before Zeta could protest further, Traore continued. "This isn't a request, Captain. Team 3 now." Minutes later, Traore was moving through the rocky terrain with just 5 operators. The sounds of intense firefights echoed. From where Teams 1 and 2 were creating the diversion, the ruse seemed to be working. No pursuit had yet appeared behind them. The team leader, Lieutenant Sankara, led them through a dry stream bed that offered cover from both sight and fire. They moved in silence, communicating only through hand signals. Traore kept pace, his breathing controlled despite the exertion and tension. After nearly an hour of escape movement, they reached a small cave that had been identified in pre-mission planning as a potential safe house. Lieutenant Sankara posted 2 men as lookouts while the rest of them took refuge inside. Status report: Traore requested once they had established temporary security. Teams 1 and 2 have both reported successful disengagement. Sankara informed him after checking his secured communications device. They're proceeding to separate rally points. 2 casualties reported. 1 minor, 1 serious but stable. And the hostages? Any confirmation? Sankara's expression darkened. "Negative, sir." Captain Zeta conducted remote heat scan of the entire camp during withdrawal. No civilian heat signatures detected. It appears the hostage situation was made up to lure us in. Traore absorbed this information with a grim nod. His suspicion had been correct. The entire operation had been exposed from the start. But how and by whom? Sir, we've analyzed the weapon signatures from the ambush. Not standard terrorist weapons. We identified French FAMA's rifles and what sound like Belgian FN Minimi. European weapons Traore mused in the hands of supposed regional terrorists. Interesting. He moved to the mouth of the cave, peering out at the lightning horizon. Dawn was approaching. Did you get visual confirmation of any of the attackers? Yes, sir. Mixed group. Local fighters, but also several Caucasian individuals with military bearing, not hired soldiers. The pieces were falling into place. Special forces, French most likely, possibly with Belgian support. He turned back to Sankara. This wasn't a terrorist trap. This was a state-sponsored operation. The realization hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just an attempt to eliminate a troublesome terrorist cell. It was an attempt to eliminate him, the president of Burkina Faso. A president who had recently nationalized foreign-owned gold mines, expelled foreign military bases, and begun charting an independent course for his resource-rich nation. Communications check, Traore ordered. I need to speak to Defense Minister Kaber immediately. While one of the operators established a secure connection, Traore considered his options. The presence of European Special Forces operators on Burkina soil, without permission, conducting what appeared to be an assassination attempt disguised as a counterterrorism operation. This was an act of war. Yet, direct confrontation with former colonial powers was not a battle Burkina Faso could win through normal means. This would require a different approach when the connection to the Defense Ministry was established. Traore spoke concisely. Minister Kaber, Operation Desert Hawk was exposed. European Special Forces were present at the target site. Prepare Protocol Sunlight immediately. Permission Code Sankara 7. Delta Protocol Sunlight was a backup plan developed for exactly this scenario. Clear evidence of foreign military interference on Burkina soil. It involved immediate diplomatic, media, and military responses, all carefully planned to expose the violation without escalating to open conflict. Understood, Mr. President, came the minister's voice, tight with concern. Are you secure? Affirmative. Proceeding to pick up Point Delta with Team 3. Expected arrival 0730 hours, sir. Backup forces are standing by. Should we deploy? Traore considered this. Negative. The engagement is over. They've withdrawn. This was a targeted operation. After ending the communication, Traore addressed the team. We move in 10 minutes. New mission rules. Collect evidence. I want shell casings, equipment, anything the attackers left behind. Proof is now as important as pickup. As they prepared to move out, Lieutenant Sankara approached him. Sir, permission to speak freely? Always, Lieutenant. What you did tonight, choosing to come on this mission, it was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen a commander do. The young officer paused. But I understand why you did it now. You suspected a trap. Traore nodded. Not specifically this trap, but something felt wrong about the intelligence. Too convenient, too precise. When information seems too good to be true in our line of work, it usually is. Sankara finished. The team moved out at first light, carefully backtracking toward the ambush site. The attackers had withdrawn, as Traore had predicted. They collected spent shell casings, abandoned equipment, and most valuably, clear boot prints that matched NATO standard military issue. By mid-morning, they had reached the pickup point where a helicopter waited to return them to Ouagadougou. As they lifted off, Traore looked down at the harsh landscape below, thinking of the centuries of foreign interference that had shaped his country's history. Today was supposed to have been another chapter in that long story, the killing of a difficult African leader who dared to reclaim his nation's resources. Instead, it would become a turning point. Back in the capital, Traore wasted no time. Still in his dust-covered combat fatigues, he convened an emergency meeting of his Security Council. The evidence collected was laid out before them. French and Belgian ammunition, communications equipment, photographs of boot prints with NATO treads. This was not a terrorist camp, Traore explained to his assembled ministers and generals. It was a killing box designed specifically to eliminate our Special Forces team, and I believe me, personally, Defense Minister Kaber reported. On the implementation of protocol, Sunlight Foreign Media has been alerted. Our evidence is being transmitted to the African Union, ECOWAS, and the UN Security Council. The French ambassador has been summoned to explain his government's actions, and the public announcement Traore asked is prepared as directed. Sir, awaiting your approval to broadcast. Traore nodded. Schedule it for 1,800 hours, prime viewing time. I want every citizen of Burkina Faso to understand exactly what happened today. That evening, still bearing the dust and fatigue of combat, Ibrahim Traore addressed his nation. He stood not behind a desk in formal attire, but in his military fatigues, the reality of his overnight mission evident in every aspect of his appearance. People of Burkina Faso, he began, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. Last night, I joined our special forces on what we believed was a mission to rescue hostages from a terrorist camp. What we discovered instead was a carefully laid trap, not by terrorists, but by foreign special forces operating illegally on our soil. He held up one of the shell casings recovered from the ambush site. This is a 5.56mm round made in Belgium, fired from a weapon that our regional terrorist groups do not possess. We recovered dozens like it, along with other evidence that definitively proves European military presence at this supposed terrorist location. The camera pulled back to show a table covered with the collected evidence methodically arranged. Let me be completely clear, Traore continued, his voice taking on an edge of controlled anger. This was an assassination attempt, thinly disguised as a counterterrorism operation. The target was not just your president, but Burkina Faso's independence itself. He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. Since our government reclaimed our gold mines from foreign control, since we began charting an independent course for our nation's resources, certain powers have viewed us as a threat to their continued use of African wealth. Last night, they attempted to solve this problem permanently. Images appeared on a screen behind him. Satellite photos showing the camp before and after, evidence of advanced equipment inconsistent with terrorist capabilities, maps indicating the strategic positioning of the ambush forces. They failed, Traore stated simply, and in failing, they have exposed themselves. Today, we have lodged formal protests with the United Nations. We have presented our evidence to the African Union, and most importantly, we are sharing the truth with you, the people of Burkina Faso. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying. To those foreign powers who believe they can still determine African leadership through assassination and interference, I say this: those days are over. The resources of Burkina Faso belong to the people of Burkina Faso. Our independence is not negotiable. Our right to self-determination is not subject to your approval. The address continued for another 15 minutes as Traore outlined the diplomatic, economic, and security measures being implemented in response to the night's events. When he concluded, he did something never done before. He opened the palace gates and walked out to meet the crowds that had suddenly gathered. Thousands of citizens had come, drawn by the extraordinary broadcast. As Traore moved among them, still in his combat fatigues, the message was unmistakable. This was a leader who fought alongside his people, who risked what they risked, and who would not ask for sacrifices he himself was unwilling to make. In the days that followed, the international response unfolded along predictable lines. The French government denied any involvement, suggesting the evidence had been made up. Western media outlets questioned Traore's account, using terms like alleged and claimed to cast doubt. But within Africa, the reaction was different. Leaders from neighboring nations, Mali, Niger, Chad, expressed solidarity. Some revealed similar experiences with foreign interference. A movement began to come together around a simple but powerful idea. African resources should benefit African people first and foremost. Even the most carefully laid traps could become opportunities. The war for resource independence had only just begun, but now at least it was being fought in the open. 1 week after the failed operation, Ibrahim Traore stood at Ouagadougou International Airport, welcoming the presidents of Mali, Niger, and Chad. It was a never-done-before summit convened on short notice with a single agenda item: the formation of a Sahel Resource Independence Partnership. What they tried to end with bullets, they have instead strengthened with their failure, Traore told his fellow leaders as they met in the presidential palace. They thought by killing one man, they could reverse the course of history. They failed to understand that what we represent is no longer about individuals. It is about a continent awakening to its own power. The partnership they formed that day would reshape regional politics for decades to come. joint security operations, planned together resource management policies, and unified negotiating positions with foreign investors, all designed to ensure that the wealth beneath African soil would finally benefit African people. For Ibrahim Traore, the night he spent in combat alongside his special forces had nearly cost him his life, yet it had given him something priceless in return: the moral power to lead not just a government but a movement. 6 months later, production at Burkina Faso's gold mines had reached record levels under national management. The revenues, now flowing directly to the Burkinabe treasury rather than foreign shareholders, funded new schools, hospitals, and infrastructure projects across the country. When asked by a journalist if he regretted his decision to personally join the ill-fated raid, knowing now that it had been a trap, Traore's response was typically direct. "I regret the danger faced by the brave soldiers who were with me that night. I regret that foreign powers still believe they have the right to determine African leadership through violence, but I do not regret being there myself." He paused, then added, "A true leader does not ask others to take risks he himself fears to face. That night taught all of us, my soldiers, our people, and those who would control us from abroad, exactly what kind of leadership Burkina Faso has chosen. The raid that had been designed to end Traore's revolution had instead cemented it, transforming a national policy into a regional movement. The trap had caught not its intended prey, but those who had set it, exposing their methods and motivations to the harsh light of international scrutiny. In presidential palaces and corporate boardrooms across Europe, a new reality was being reluctantly acknowledged. Africa was changing. The old methods of control were failing. Leaders like Ibrahim Traore, willing to put their lives on the line for their principles, could not be scared or killed as easily as those before. The night of the raid became known throughout Burkina Faso simply as the President's March, the night when their leader had walked into danger alongside common soldiers and returned with both his life and a powerful truth. Those who would rule through fear had reason to fear themselves now. For Traore, the lesson was equally clear. The path to true independence would be dangerous, perhaps even deadly. Foreign interests would not surrender their special rights without a fight. But as he had discovered in the darkness of that ambush, when the cause was just, even the most carefully laid traps could become opportunities. The war for resource independence had only just begun, but now, at least it was being fought in the open.